My husband, David, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Clara needs this vacation, Elena. She's burnt out from her clinic, and you know how fragile her mental health is since the divorce. It's just a brother-in-law and sister trip to Hawaii. Don't be so insecure." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just packed his favorite Tom Ford suits into 3 large suitcases, handed him his passport at the front door, and kissed his cheek. "Have the time of your life," I whispered. He had no idea that while he was booking a 10-day luxury suite in Maui with my inheritance money, I was sitting in my family lawyer's office. He didn't know I had already subpoenaed our joint bank accounts, frozen our business lines, and changed the locks on our Pacific Heights home. David thought he was escaping his boring wife for a tropical getaway with my golden child sister. Instead, he was walking straight into the financial guillotine I had quietly built for them. My husband, David, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Clara needs this vacation, Elena. She's burnt out from her clinic, and you know how fragile her mental health is since the divorce. It's just a brother-in-law and sister trip to Hawaii. Don't be so insecure." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just packed his favorite Tom Ford suits into 3 large suitcases, handed him his passport at the front door, and kissed his cheek. "Have the time of your life," I whispered. He had no idea that while he was booking a 10-day luxury suite in Maui with my inheritance money, I was sitting in my family lawyer's office. He didn't know I had already subpoenaed our joint bank accounts, frozen our business lines, and changed the locks on our Pacific Heights home. David thought he was escaping his boring wife for a tropical getaway with my golden child sister. Instead, he was walking straight into the financial guillotine I had quietly built for them. Let's be clear, I never actually asked if they slept together. For months, people would have called me foolish or blind. They would have asked how I could let my husband jet off to the islands with my younger sister. But when you've been married for 12 years, you stop needing words to translate the truth. You don't need a confession when the body language tells the entire story. You don't need to inspect the sheets when the foundation of the house has already turned to ash. For the past year, my sister Clara had transformed from a struggling nurse into a woman draped in designer labels she couldn't afford on her salary. And David? David had developed a sudden, passionate interest in family support. Every weekend emergency at Clara's apartment, every late-night phone call about her anxiety, every impromptu business dinner where my sister just happened to be the guest of honor, it was all right there in plain sight. When David kissed my cheek at the front door that morning, smelling of expensive cologne and smelling faintly of a getaway he had planned without consulting me, I felt a strange, chilling peace settle over my bones. The anger was gone. The confusion had burned away. All that remained was cold, surgical clarity. He thought he was leaving behind a naive wife who would spend 10 days crying into a tub of ice cream while waiting for him to text. He had no idea that the locks he was walking away from were never going to open for him again. The second the taxi carrying David and his rolling suitcases turned the corner of our street, the front door clicked shut behind him, and the heavy silence of the house settled over me. But it wasn't the suffocating silence I had lived with for months. It was the sharp, humming quiet of a strategy room before an operation begins. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my car keys, walked out to my sedan, and drove straight into downtown Seattle to the glass-fronted offices of Sterling and Vance Family Law. My attorney, Marcus Vance, was a man who didn't do pleasantries. He was a veteran litigator who specialized in high-net-worth forensic unraveling, and the moment I slid my laptop and a thick manila folder across his mahogany desk, his eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Let me guess," Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair and tapping a gold-plated pen against his chin. "A routine asset check before an amicable separation?" "Not quite, Marcus," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor people expected from a betrayed wife. "My husband just boarded a flight to Maui with my sister. I want every single cent, every asset, and every hidden transaction exposed before he lands in paradise." For the next 4 hours, Marcus's forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn, dissected our financial life down to the microchip. And that was when the real nightmare, or rather, my weapon, unfurled across the computer screen. David hadn't just been funding a casual affair. He had been running a masterclass in corporate and marital embezzlement. For the past 3 years, while I worked 60-hour weeks managing the logistics firm my father left me, David had been quietly draining our joint operating accounts. He had set up a shell LLC under a fake business name, funneled over $400,000 of my inheritance into it, and used those funds to lease a luxury downtown waterfront apartment for Clara. There were receipts for custom diamond tennis bracelets, luxury spa weekends masked on our statements as regional corporate training retreats, and first-class flights to New York, Paris, and now Hawaii, all charged to the credit cards I paid off every month without looking too closely. Evelyn pointed at a highlighted line item dated just 2 days prior. He also transferred $150,000 from your commercial real estate holding account into a personal investment portfolio held solely in his name. If he liquidates that while out of state, recovering it gets complicated. He won't have the chance, I said softly, sliding a pre-signed authorization form across the desk. Freeze every single personal, joint, and business account tied to his social security number. File an emergency injunction for asset dissipation, and issue a corporate audit flag on his company credit lines immediately. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. Elena, most people come in here weeping, begging for mercy for their spouses. You look like a general mapping out a battlefield. Because I'm done being collateral damage, I told him. By 2 p.m., the legal gears were grinding into motion. The banks were locked. The credit cards were dead. The corporate lines were frozen. Back in Maui, David was likely checking into his 5-star oceanfront suite, ordering champagne, and texting me a cheerful photo of the sunset, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire financial empire had just been vaporized. As I drove back home through the gray Seattle drizzle, my phone buzzed against the dashboard. It was a text message from David's number. Landed safely in paradise, babe. The resort is incredible. Wish you were more chill and came with us, but I'll call you later tonight after we unpack. I glanced down at the screen, tapped the power button to silence the notification, and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Let him enjoy the view while it lasted. The tide was about to go out, and neither he nor my sister had learned how to swim. Meanwhile, for 1,000 miles away in Maui, the tropical sun was beating down on the pristine white sands of Wailea, and David and Clara were living their absolute best lives. I knew this because Clara's public Instagram story was a masterclass in tone-deaf performance art. There they were, clinking crystal flutes of champagne by an infinity pool, draped in designer resort where that had been charged directly to my line of credit. In every photo, David wore that easy, self-satisfied grin of a man who thought he had successfully outsmarted the universe. He had left his boring, hard-working wife behind in the gray rain, confident that his golden child, sister-in-law turned mistress, was his ticket to a glamorous, effortless future. He didn't know that back in Seattle, the ceiling was about to cave in. On day 3 of their tropical escape, the illusion began to fracture. It started innocently enough with a declining text message. David tried to reserve a private sunset catamaran charter for 2, a breezy $1,200 charge meant to impress Clara. But instead of an approval notification, his phone buzzed with an automated alert from the credit card issuer. Transaction declined. Please contact customer service. Irritated, David assumed it was just a routine fraud prevention hold. He strolled up to the resort's high-end boutique later that afternoon to buy Clara a silk Gucci cover-up, confident the glitch would be sorted. He handed the titanium card to the clerk with a charming, easy smile. The clerk swiped it. The terminal flashed red. The clerk tried a second time, then a third. I'm sorry, sir, the receptionist said politely, her voice carrying across the marble lobby. The card is coming back as locked by the issuing financial institution. Do you have an alternate form of payment? David's smile flickered. He pulled out a secondary backup card, one tied to our joint business operating account. He handed it over with a slightly tighter grip. The machine processed for 3 excruciating seconds before spitting out the exact same flat, humiliating rejection. Card declined. By evening, the panic had set in. David was pacing the length of their ocean view balcony, frantically dialing customer service hotlines, only to be shunted through endless automated loops telling him that all accounts linked to his identity and corporate profile had been placed under administrative review due to suspicious activity flags. His personal credit cards? Frozen. His corporate expense card? Suspended pending an internal forensic audit. The secret LLC account he had been siphoning money into? Subpoenaed and locked tight by a court order. Inside the suite, Clara was lounging on the king-size bed scrolling through her phone, entirely unaware that the financial floor beneath them had just collapsed. "Babe," she called out, her voice dripping with lazy entitlement. "There's this amazing spa package tomorrow morning. Volcanic ash wraps, private cabana. Can you put it on the black card?" David turned away from the sliding glass door, his face pale, sweat beading at his hairline despite the ocean breeze. The reality was finally starting to set in. He wasn't a clever mastermind executing a brilliant double life. He was a stranded man on an expensive island, with no cash, no credit, and a frozen empire. While they sat trapped in paradise realizing they couldn't even pay for room service, my legal team was already serving formal notice to David's employer regarding the corporate misappropriation of funds. The vacation wasn't just ending. The bill was coming due, and neither of them had any idea how high the price was going to be. 10 days later, the tropical tan David and Clara had worked so hard to acquire looked less like a luxury vacation glow and more like the panicked flush of cornered animals. When their flight from Honolulu touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, they were probably expecting a quiet Uber ride back to their normal routines, or perhaps a panicked text from me demanding an explanation. Instead, what awaited them at the baggage claim was a masterclass in calculated precision. As they stepped off the escalator hauling their designer luggage, 2 uniformed Pierce County Sheriff's deputies intercepted them right by Carousel 4. Standing right beside the deputies was Marcus, my attorney, holding a thick leather portfolio, and myself, sitting calmly on a molded plastic airport bench, wearing my favorite tailored gray blazer, holding a lukewarm cup of black coffee. David stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes darting from the badges to my face, his color draining instantly. "Elena? What is the meaning of this? Are you insane? Making a public scene like this?" Clara stepped up behind him, her voice shrill and defensive. "Yeah, Elena, have you completely lost your mind? We just got back from a legitimate family trip, and you're acting like a hysterical lunatic." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even stand up. I simply set my coffee cup down, reached into my bag, and pulled out 3 separate manila folders, handing them directly to the deputies to distribute. "Not hysterical, Clara," I said, my tone as flat and cold as winter glass. "Just organized." I looked up at David, whose expensive Tom Ford suit was now wrinkled from a 10-hour coach flight, because, of course, his first-class return tickets had bounced along with everything else. "Welcome home, David. I trust the views in Maui were worth it, because as of 48 hours ago, the lease on your downtown waterfront love nest was terminated, your personal bank accounts are empty, and your corporate office has locked your access badges pending an embezzlement investigation." David staggered backward, colliding with a luggage cart. You couldn't have. You wouldn't. "Try me," I replied softly, sliding a thick stack of legal documents right into his trembling hands. "That's a petition for dissolution of marriage based on extreme financial infidelity, alongside a certified audit of the $400,000 you funneled from my corporate holding accounts into Clara's apartment. And Clara? That envelope on top is an eviction notice for your illegal occupancy of a property leased with my marital assets." For a split second, total, suffocating silence hung in the crowded baggage claim. The performance armor they had worn for 3 years cracked right down the middle. Clara spun around, staring at David with wide, accusing eyes, her voice pitching into a panic. "You told me she didn't know anything. You said her money was completely safe to use." "Shut up, Clara. Just shut up," David hissed, his face contorting into a mask of pure rage as he realized his meal ticket had not only vanished, but had turned into a concrete prison wall. The deputies stepped forward, firmly placing their hands near their utility belts. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Vance, you've been formally served." Any further attempt to contact Mrs. Hartman or tamper with disputed assets will result in immediate custodial arrest. Have a pleasant afternoon. I stood up, smoothed down my blazer, and walked right past them toward the exit doors, not looking back once. Behind me, the fragile house of cards they had built was collapsing into dust, and for the first time in 28 years, I wasn't there to catch them. The alliance that had sustained David and Clara's secret life didn't just crack at the airport. It shattered into a million irreversible pieces. By the time the ink dried on the legal notices, the blame game had already begun. Clara called our parents sobbing, claiming David had trapped her, manipulated her, and lied about being separated from me. David, meanwhile, called mutual acquaintances trying to paint himself as the victim of a vindictive, calculating wife who had ruthlessly blindsided him. Neither of them could bear to look in the mirror and accept the simple, brutal truth. They had built their entire future on theft and deception, and the bill had finally come due. The professional fallout was just as swift and merciless. Meridian Technologies and our local business partners didn't take kindly to corporate embezzlement and financial misconduct. Within 3 weeks of the airport confrontation, David was terminated for cause, his reputation in the corporate logistics sector permanently incinerated. Nobody hires a man who treats his wife's inheritance like his own personal venture capital fund. Clara lost her position at her clinic after the administrative review flagged her involvement in the misallocated funds, forcing her to move back in with our exhausted, humiliated parents in a modest suburban home she had once looked down upon. As for me, I didn't celebrate, and I certainly didn't look back. I finalized the sale of our Pacific Heights estate. Too many ghosts, too many hollow memories built on a foundation of polite lies, and used the recovered capital to purchase a quiet, sunlit coastal condo overlooking the Puget Sound. Standing on my new balcony one crisp autumn morning, holding a mug of hot coffee and listening to the gulls wheeling over the gray water, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a decade. Absolute, unadulterated peace. There were no secret phone calls to decode, no performance scripts to maintain, no double lives ticking away in the background. Just my life, built with my own hands, honest and clean. If you are currently sitting across the table from someone who takes your loyalty for granted, who treats your sacrifice as weakness while building an escape route behind your back, hear me clearly. Stop waiting for them to confess. Stop asking if the betrayal is real. Take the quiet power back, protect your foundation, and let them fall into the exact trap they dug for you. Because freedom isn't found in revenge. It's found in the moment you realize you don't need them to survive anymore.